Well, it's another week here for Beyond the Forecast. Steve Fundera, how you been? How you been doing?
Hey, we're doing all right. We're actually been honestly kind of tired of the weather recently.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, both of us have been. It's been like every day. We've had around a couple thunderstorms, and it's been like, oh my gosh. So it's nice to have a couple breaks here. There, weather's been cooperative a little bit this week.
It's been a week with a lot of clouds across our area.
This is true.
A lot of clouds at night, and when I want to have clear skies at night, that's when I want to try and get the telescope out.
Yeah.
I haven't
Telescope
had much,
10.
Yeah, haven't had much time to get Telescope 10 out, so that's what we're going to be talking about. This week, we're going to be talking about astrophotography. This is an image here from George Konkov of Jupiter and Ganymede. So images of planets, images of, let's see if I can get that up. I want to show you the image of the spiral galaxy.
Jeez Louise.
So this is everything he's captured in his backyard.
Which is just insane to think about. We work in a place full of photographers, full of videographers. We capture images and videos every day on a daily basis. But that's on planet Earth.
Yes. This is not from the
This is a
Hubble.
whole other realm.
This is not
of
from
photography.
the James Webb Space Telescope. This is from his backyard here in Hampton Roads.
So we're gonna learn about like the setup, what goes behind it.
Yes.
Does he use softwares to track?
There's a lot of stuff.
Movements of all that stuff because many of you may not know, but like when Jeff sets up Telescope 10, you have to the things in frame are going to be moving out of frame because of the relationship with how tight you're zoomed in. Like think about when we zoom in a camera, or if you zoom in a camera, every little movement you have is amplified.
Yes, because if you're zooming in a camera on someone across a pond, or like let's say there's a weird animal that's like moving around, you're trying to follow it with your camera, it's hard to follow.
Yeah.
But now we're talking millions of miles away, or light years
wild.
away.
It's super cool. Super cool.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about here. That's going to be our first interview. It's myself with George, and then we'll come back and we'll have some more topics. So let's go over to that. Joining me now is George Konkov. George Konkov is one of the best, at least that I've met, astrophotographers in our area. He's taught me a lot on some of the images that I've shown you on the air. George, welcome to Beyond the Forecast.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
So how long have you been involved in working with telescopes and doing astrophotography?
Working with telescopes since 2012, so it's been 13 years. Can you believe it? But yeah, talking about space in general, it was all since childhood. But yeah, I got my first telescope in 2012 and started just like with looking through the eyepiece. Then I got an idea. It's like, hey, what if I attach the camera? And yeah, it's basically pretty much the process began.
And for astrophotography, this is something that you're not doing this full time. What else are you doing too?
Currently, I'm full-time student, first of all, and I'm finishing local college at TCC, and that's my priority number one, of course. And the second one, it's astrophotography.
Priority number one when the skies are cloudy, but when they're clear, maybe the priorities change a little bit, don't they?
Yeah,
yeah, they definitely do. So astrophotography, you've taught me a lot over the last couple of years. Basically, we're looking through the eyepiece of a telescope when we have maybe the first time when you have a child that comes along to look through the eyepiece, they say, oh, that's cool. And then maybe the parent says, oh, I want to take a picture of that. That's the basics of astrophotography. We want to get an image of what we're looking at. But in some of the situations that, at least, or some of the things that I've done, it's planets that we can see, but you've captured a lot more than that. Things like a solar eclipse, things like distant nebulas and other galaxies. So that's what we're going to dive into more. Some of the equipment that's needed for that, and also some of the images that we can share. So which one do we want to look at first? Do we want to look at the solar eclipse from last year?
let's dive into that then. Let me share my screen first.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, screen number 2, share. All right, can you see my screen?
It is coming up right now, yes.
Perfect. So let's start with this image of the solar eclipse. All right.
So this is back on April 8th, 2024. Where were you when you took this?
We went up to all the way to New Hampshire because the weather a year ago was really challenging. My original plan was to go either to Ohio, Illinois, or somewhere like in this area, maybe Texas. Like all the areas were different, but the weather made some changes, and I ended up being up in New Hampshire, just a few miles from Canada, actually. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember we were talking the night before on the 7th, trying to figure out where the clouds are going to go. That was fun. Good thing we had clear skies. Now, what are we looking at here in this image? This is absolutely beautiful. I've seen this before, but I want to for the viewers.
Yeah, so basically this one is how I call it a full HDR image of the solar eclipse. And basically when you like if you happen to see a total solar eclipse, all you can see is just solar corona, then the huge kind of ring of fire like around the dark moon. But when you take lots of images through the telescope using different exposures, you can reveal a lot of details like beyond what you can see with the naked eye. And that's basically the case for this image. So if I'm going to open the and look at the image closer, you can see the details on the moon surface. You can see a solar prominence over here. You can see the solar
Yes.
corona, of course, itself, and lots of this stuff that's going on. And also you can see there are some dots on the image, but those dots, those are actual stars that I was also able to reveal. And we in New Hampshire, we got just a little over than 3 minutes of totality. And basically, what I was doing, I was taking lots of like hundreds of images through the telescope with the camera, using different exposures, something like longer exposures, some were shorter exposures, to reveal all these details. And just to process these image, it took me, I'd say, a month of total of constant processing the image, because I was also learning how to process solar images as I had never done it before. And that was challenging. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the shot that I got. And considering that was my very first time observing the total solar eclipse. And yeah, pretty much that's how it went.
Yeah, because you had to manage the excitement of the eclipse and also capturing the images and getting
Right.
the data at the
Yeah.
same time. It was one of those things where you can get the data now and then worry about processing it later. So that's a smart way to do it. I know when I was looking at it, everyone that was in totality, we could all see the corona, we could all see the prominence, and we can clearly see that in this image here.
Yeah.
What telescope did you use for this?
For this one, I used so the brand of the telescope was Skywatcher, and that's basically just a regular refractor, meaning the telescope has a lens as the source to go like basically the source for the light to go through, and the aperture for the telescope was just 80 millimeters, so it's not a big telescope, and the focal length that I had here was 480 millimeters using like reducer like additional lens. And this shot was actually taken using just a regular DSLR camera. So in astrophotography, like in amateur astrophotography, we use usually for deep sky imaging special dedicated astronomy cameras. But this one was shot using, I have it down here, Canon EOS 6D Mark II. So pretty old, but still cool full frame camera. And yeah,
It can get some amazing images. So you showed this to me right before we started talking. So there's different types of cameras. When you get into astrophotography, and I didn't know this when I first got into it, but you opened me up to a world that just keeps going. So there's a lot of different cameras. So what kind of cameras? You have some examples next to you right now.
got it. So there are basically a few examples. So first one that I want to show you, this is just a regular DSLR camera. This one is not the one that I used to take the image of the solar eclipse, but just
Let's
to get an idea,
and just
it's
not interrupt. Just stop sharing your screen so everyone can see it full screen.
oh, hold on a second. Yeah,
Yeah,
stop sharing. Perfect.
there we
So
go.
just a regular DSLR camera, and basically the idea that we do here is that all the cameras, they have a body and they have a lens. In an astrophotography, basically, instead of the lens, we use a telescope. So you attach the camera to a telescope and you take your images. Now, so this is the first way you can go to. Second way is there is a special dedicated astronomy camera. So this one is by the company ZWO, and one of the most popular brands within their within the amateur photography field. Basically, the idea is also the same here. Let me actually show you quickly. So if you look at the DSLR has a sensor. Let me show you. So
Right there.
DSLR camera has a sensor, and dedicated photography camera has a sensor. And the key difference between this specialist photography camera and DSLR camera is that this one usually has better specs for taking longer exposure images with lower amount of noise. And the most important feature of this camera is the cooling. So when we take long exposure images, the sensor of the camera, it gets overheated sometimes and we get more noise. And when you use a cooler on the camera, you bring the temperature of the sensor 30, 35 degrees Celsius below the ambient. And that really helps a lot when you take images, and the amount of noise that you get on images, it's reduced, and the amount of useful information, like the data, the actual data that we see, is increased.
One thing that I learned with doing astrophotography or just simply looking through a telescope is that the temperature of the equipment is very important. So you showed how we want to keep the sensor cool for deep sky photography. Just that's just for the camera, but for the whole telescope, for example, you don't carry it all outside from your warm house and then say, "Okay, it's ready to go," because the whole telescope needs to come down and try to match the outside ambient temperature, because what happens if you don't do that, George?
Basically, if you don't do that, then you see all the pressures of our planet Earth atmosphere. So the thing is that if the temperature of the telescope itself, is different from the ambient temperature, is that the telescope itself might create this turbulence in the air. And when you look at the images, I'm sorry, when you look at the objects in space, especially at the higher focal length, then you can see all this turbulence in the air, and basically the image becomes more distorted. And all you have to do is just to catch, first of all, wait some time before the temperature of the telescope body cools down and becomes the same as the ambient. And second of all is just, catch these, when you take planetary images, you catch the seconds, milliseconds of good seeing. And when it comes to deep sky astrophotography, it's actually not as crucial, because usually when we go for deep sky imaging, we take images with a shorter focal length where the turbulence is less affected compared to planetary, of course.
There's a
But yeah,
lot of
overall, the idea is that, yes, you want to consider all these factors like temperature of the telescope, temperature of the sensor, as it all matters.
there's so many different things that's going on, because you have to make sure the telescope is cool, but then also you have to make sure that you don't get dew to form on top of the telescope itself,
Yes.
because that can be a problem. There's ways to mitigate that, but there's just so many different things. But for the beginner, though, to do astrophotography, I would say, where would you say it's easiest to start? What would be a good target to start with?
The moon, definitely the moon. The closest and the easiest object, in my opinion, is the moon. Is basically that's how I started. And I might show you my first image of the moon I captured. Actually, was 2013, because I started into the hobby in 2012, but it took me a few months, and it was 2013 back in the time when I took my first image. So what I basically did is what I got a DSLR camera with a lens, and instead of attaching the body, I was catching this like source of light through the eyepiece, and that's how I got my first image of the moon. But if you wanna, that was 13 years ago. What you wanna do now and what you can do now, there are special adapters that instead of connecting the camera body to the lens, you can just connect it to the telescope using special adapter. Or everybody has smartphone.
Yep.
What you can do is just, if you have a simple telescope, point it to the moon, open up your camera app, connect it to the eyepiece, and sometimes I've seen actually some images of the moon taken through the phone, and sometimes, like when you look at the description, you're like, oh, that was taken through the phone, not through the camera, like the special dedicated camera. And yeah, sometimes that's what you can start with, and that's
So
what I started with.
your image, and let's go to another image here in a second, but your image of the solar eclipse is actually just a really nice image of the moon.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's a little better than that. It's a little better than that. The sun is being blocked. There's a lot of stuff going on. Let's
Yes.
look at some of your deep sky photography, some of your deep sky images, because those have blown me away. When we look at some of these here, I would say some of these compete with some of the best images that we've seen, even from the Hubble. These are absolutely beautiful. There's so many to choose from. We see the planetary ones. We're seeing Jupiter a lot. We're seeing some other comets as well. But let's maybe go towards one of those spiral galaxies on the top row. Let's tell me more about those.
Uh, let's start. I
You
don't
want to do
know.
the needle?
Let's go with the needle. Yeah, you got it.
Okay, let's do that. So when did you take this image?
So this one I got at the end of this April, and this one actually was taken using and pretty old, but still cool. Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope made by Meade. So Meade is an American company, and the telescope itself was produced in late 90s. But still, as you can see in 2025, the work's just great. Basically, what we can see here is the galaxy called the Needle Galaxy, or its catalog name NGC 4565, located a few million light years away from us. But since the telescope has a higher magnification power, then we can see the galaxy up close. And if we can take a closer look, we can see that basically galaxy itself is located kind of edge on, so we can see all these details, all this dust in the galaxy, and the regions where the stars are forming, the kind of brighter compared to the dust regions of the galaxy. But yeah, this one was taken using Meade telescope, and the camera that I used was actually a monochrome camera, and that's something that we didn't touch on this program yet, is that you can use either a color camera or a so-called monochrome cameras. And I'm going to show you once I stop sharing the screen what's the difference between these cameras. But in short, the idea is that when you take an image with a color camera, you snap a picture and you have an actual color image, the one that is the same one as you would take a picture of your family member in colors and everything. When it comes to monochrome photography, then what you do is basically take images through special filters. And in all the smartphone cameras, there's a filter called Bayer filter, where basically there are three different color filters: R, red, blue, and green, called RGB. R stands for red, G for green, and blue for blue. Basically, what you do is you take an image through the red filter, then you switch to a green filter, take an image through this one, then through the blue one, and then you combine these images in order to get a color one. In short, the images taken with the monochrome camera, they crisper, they have less noise, but of course it takes much more time to get a result compared to the images taken with the color camera.
How many hours or how long of exposure did it take for you to get this image here?
This one wasn't actually a lot. So this was my test image, and here I got 3 hours of total integration time. I got an hour in each filter. Yeah, but usually when I work on my bigger projects, I go for 40, for 100. I have an image with 300 hours of integration time. And those one that I especially hunt for. And it takes me months sometimes to get the final image. But this one, yeah, I just spent one night, as the telescope itself, I'm kind of working on rebuilding it, as it was not kind of suitable for astrophotography, for deep sky astrophotography, but I'm working on the telescope. And yeah, that's just one of the test images that I captured using it.
So you're saying 300 hours pointing at the same part of the sky. So that's obviously not in one night. That's several nights when it's clear and when
for
conditions
300, yeah, it took me 2 years to complete the image.
That's a long time, but that's awesome. That's crazy how well that works. It's a lot of light to gather into the telescope and into the sensor, but it turns out to be some beautiful images. Now, what about planetary astrophotography?
Planetary is a totally different creature. So let me actually show you, not this one. Yeah, we'll touch on this one and on this image of Jupiter. So this image was actually taken using exactly the same telescope. So as you can see, we got this image of the Needle Galaxy, and this image of Jupiter was taken using exactly the same telescope, but it had a different camera. So Jupiter is the biggest planet in our solar system, and
just look at the image right here. So we have the Great Red Spot, which is, I believe at one point, maybe about 2 decades ago, it was around 3 Earths wide. Now I think it's around 2 Earths wide. So it's gotten a little smaller over time. But we can see the Great Red Spot. We can see one of its many moons, Ganymede, in this image. And it's amazing how clear the moon even looks. I feel like I can see some of the surface features on the moon itself, or at least the side that's illuminated, which is incredible. Of course, all the spots on Jupiter are incredible too. But look at that. So this is not something that you would capture for hours and hours, correct?
Yes, when it comes to planetary imaging, it all goes to fractions of a second, basically, when you take images. So when we take deep sky photography, we usually take pictures of galaxies, of nebulae, of star clusters that are located millions light years away from us. Jupiter is located in millions miles from us, and it's much brighter and it's much closer. So we don't need that long exposures in order to reveal the image of the planet. And in fact, when we take images of planets, we use higher focal length, like higher magnification power of the telescopes, and that's the part that comes tricky with the turbulence. So I might show you the actual like video of the Jupiter that I take, and actually, yeah, that's the whole difference between deep sky photography and planetary imaging. When it's deep sky, it's an image. When it's planetary imaging, it's all about videos, because if you take a look at the video is basically a sequence of images that we capture, 30, 60 frames per second. And when it comes to imaging, Jupiter is usually, I try to go for like, and take videos at 60, 90 frames per second rate. And what you can do, I mean, what you basically do is you record a video of Jupiter for a minute and a half. During this time, you basically have like 5,000 sub exposures images of Jupiter. And there's also special software where you send the video file to the software. Software analyzes all these 5,000 separate images, picks the best out of the best, and then becomes stacking process where you stack all these images. Because the thing is, you don't want to stack all the 5,000 images. Some of the images were captured when the atmosphere was more blurry. Some of the images, like maybe 500 of them, maybe 800 of them, were taken when the atmosphere was stable and you got this clearer image. As for example, here, you can see that the image of the Jupiter is pretty detailed. It's not the best one that I captured, but the next one, oh, not this one. The next one I'm going to show you, this image of Jupiter, was taken using exactly the same telescope, exactly the same camera, but on a different night. It was clear, but the quality of the atmosphere was much better compared to this image. And as you can see, the Jupiter itself, it's even brighter. There is less noise, and there is more like tiny and fine details of the Jupiter. And yes, basically, I was taking images of this planet for the 4 months in the fall last year, and I only got this one night of imaging where I got my best shot. And like out of these 4 months, I'd say 90% of all the data that I collected, it just went to the bin in a computer, since I wasn't able to get any good results just because of the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to have a lot of hard drive space when you're doing this, because I know I've done it as well, and you're getting gigabytes of data quickly when you're capturing these images and trying to get the right, especially on the right night, because you just keep trying and you hope for obviously no clouds, but you also just hope for the atmosphere just to be stable for a little bit so you can get views like this. I mean, look at the bands. You have the bright red bands. Above that, you can see the dark spots, the 4 dark spots where there's different storms that are in the upper atmosphere of Jupiter. So this is an amazing image. I'm really excited and I think Jupiter is going to get more attention once NASA's Europa Clipper mission gets there. I think we're going to get more images. People are going to get more excited about imaging Jupiter. One thing that's cool though, when you look through the eyepiece, on a good telescope, you can see Jupiter and it's super crisp and super clear. With a camera, it's hard to capture that sometimes just because of the turbulence and how cameras work.
Yeah, that's right. And that's actually, like, if you look at the video, I'm actually show it to you.
It's kind of fun to see how it works. So just because you get this raw video through the telescope, and I've shown it on TV before too, through Telescope 10 of that, and then you just take those best frames out of that. So you take 20% of that video, let's say, and then you get that image stack, and that's what you can create here. This is amazing. This is a really cool view of Jupiter. I mean, I remember we've been talking, sometimes it's 1, 2 a.m. We're saying, hey, how's the scene up where you are? Because it can change from where you are compared to where I am for the atmospheric conditions, which is wild too.
Yeah, because I remember one of the clear nights, it was in late October, I believe. That was exactly like 1 or 2 in the morning, and you sent me your image of Jupiter. That was actually the first best image that you sent me with a great red spot. And I was like, man, that looks awesome. I pulled up, and my telescope was outside at the same time, also pointing at Jupiter, and my images were bad. And
Yeah.
I live in Williamsburg. You live in Chesapeake, right?
Yeah.
In Chesapeake area, and yeah, it's just like 30 minutes to 45 minutes of driving, and but it sometimes crucial, and the atmosphere is different, and yeah, one Jeff gets the best image, I get nothing, but on the next night it's might be all different.
It's the exact opposite. We have time for one more image here, and then we got to wrap this up. And we're gonna have to do this conversation more often because this is you have a lot of stuff to share here. This is really cool. So maybe the Great Globular cluster that you captured recently. Do you want to share that?
This one, yeah, that's also one of my test images taken with this mid telescope. So here we're looking at the cluster called the Messier 13, also known as the Great Globular Cluster. It's basically one of the largest clusters as we look at them, like in terms of angular size in the sky. And for this one, I captured just a little bit lesser than 2 hours of total integration time. As you can see here, it's 1 hour and 48 minutes taken using a color camera. But what's cool about this image is I like to look at it at 100% zoom. You can see all these different stars that are separated. As, for example, if you look through this, if you look at this cluster through a telescope, through a small one, all you can see is just basically kind of blurred point of light. And through bigger telescopes, you can see like separate stars. But once you point really like middle class amateur telescope, you can see that these surrounding stars and everything, they separated. And just imagine, like in this cluster, there are hundreds of thousands of different stars. Just imagine if someone lives there, what would they see in the night sky? I mean, there is no night sky basically if someone lives nearby, because there are lots of stars. And yeah, that's just.
And then we have to think about it too, the way that we're looking at it could be totally different if you were in another part of the universe, another part of the galaxy looking in this direction, what the cluster may look like. In this case, it would probably look pretty similar, but when we look at obviously the other galaxies, some of the other images that we've seen, the angle of the galaxy would appear totally different. So this is cool. So like one thing, think of like we see the Orion constellation the way we do because where we are in our galaxy, but if you're in another spot in the universe, it's not going to look like that. The shape will totally change.
Yes, and to quickly show you that one galaxy might appear like that, and that's a spiral galaxy. The other galaxy appears at a totally different angle, and we can see all the spiral arms.
Yep.
And there are like millions of galaxies basically in space. Some of them located closer. That's why we see them with all the details. But for example, if you look at this image, some of the stars here, those actually distant galaxies is located even more like far away, and fortunately we cannot see them in that great details. But yeah, at least something like in this area. Some of the stars, those are actually galaxies like this one maybe. We don't know just because they're located really far away, and for us, unfortunately, at the moment, it's impossible to look at them at all the details. But yeah, that's what's exciting about photography, pretty much.
Yeah, there's a lot. So for people that want to get involved and get started with this, I know you have a YouTube channel that you've had for a while that has the basics, has more advanced stuff, has kind of looking at new cameras and new things that are available. So tell everyone where we can find more.
So the easiest way is we have a local astronomy club called Back Bay Amateur Astronomers.
Yes.
So you can just Google Back Bay Amateur Astronomers. There is a group on Facebook. Occasionally, I post my images there, but there are lots of folks, they do local events. Like, for example, sometimes I get on YouTube, I get comments, hey, can you advise me on this telescope? What should I buy? I always respond, don't buy a telescope yet. Search for a local astronomy club. They do events. Then, first of all, you can look through a telescope for free. Because sometimes they have events specifically for members, but sometimes they're open events. And you don't have to buy a telescope. You can just look for free to see if you like it. And in most cases, people just end up with buying their own telescope, of course, joining the club. But yeah, the other way is, yes, my YouTube channel, Astro Creation. But basically the stuff that I do here is I share my photography adventures. So for example, one of my latest projects is, as I said, the telescope that I'm working on. I just post my videos like updates, what I do, as if I have faced, for example, a problem, somebody else might face the same problem. So my video could help the different folks with the situations like that. And of course, sometimes people post comments with the questions, and you need to make a video in order to respond to the question.
Yes,
and that's pretty much how it works on YouTube. So yeah.
Did you have another camera that you wanted to show us too?
Oh yeah, that's the one just the difference between a color camera and a monochrome camera. So the color camera is simple. Just sensor, take a picture, get a color image. A monochrome camera, it doesn't, that looks like that, but you need a filter wheel with the different filters. And as you can see, I don't want to touch the filter.
Nope, don't touch the filter.
Yeah, there are different filters, and each filter represents its own light. So for example, we have, as I said, RGB filters that stand for red, green, and blue. We also have narrowband images, and that's the totally different area that we might cover in the next time, right?
Yeah, we'll get into that more because we're running low on time, and I think we don't want anyone's head to explode from all the information. But these images are so cool. So monochrome cameras, color cameras, filter wheels. I think that's something that we can get to maybe on a more advanced talk next time.
Yeah, and basically, I think if the folks have any questions in the comments, maybe that's something that we can discuss next time if anyone's interested.
Yeah, so you're on YouTube. You have your channel called Astro Creation. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so you can find more from George there. Otherwise, we'll continue our conversation here on Beyond the Forecast, and we'll try and also show you where you can look at those images that George has shared as well. So thank you, George, for your time today. Appreciate it, and we'll get you on for another one.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. Thanks, everyone.
All right, we'll now go back to the studio. All right, welcome back, everyone. We learned a lot about astrophotography.
That's insane.
And this is only a tiny little percent of setting everything up, because for me, it was weeks and weeks of learning the software, learning how to get the camera and the telescope to align just right, the focus. So we're going to have him back and probably talk about it more in the future.
And also, I love that that's accessible by most folks in their backyard. I mean, it's a whole new thing that you have to learn to pick up and go for it, but it's in the realm of possibility. Like if you ever wondered, something you could do.
The easiest target is the moon.
Yeah,
that's
a great place to start.
Right there. So we'll see what
Not
you
the
get.
sun. Don't start at the sun.
No,
don't do that.
No,
don't do that.
Well, we saw the eclipse image. But if you have any images of the moon or other planets, send it in. We'll be able to showcase those here in the future. For
and you
another
could use
wavy.com/report
it. That's where many of the images that you send us comes right in, and we're able to share online, or we could share right here on Wavy Plus. And many of photos we've got recently were of some severe weather across town, particularly hail. Hail, like this one.
Yes.
And this was part of the reason why Jeff and I had mentioned we were a bit tired of the weather of recently, because
this is 2 weeks ago.
That's 2 weeks ago, but then we had another event that was capable of producing hail. I think we got some hail reports about a week later. So we've just been in an active severe weather pattern, which always is the case here when we're in the month of May, April, May. So yeah, we're used to it. But also, I can't remember the last time we saw some significant hail across parts of Hampton Roads.
This is, I would call this event a widespread event for people, for like a heart of a population.
Sure.
The size of the hail, we saw it in that first picture, and we're seeing it here. This isn't the kind of hail that's going to destroy the garden here.
Yeah, I think like we're looking at zucchini plants right there. Tomatoes on the left, zucchinis in the middle. Maybe there's eggplant in the middle as well.
Oh, eggplant.
Yeah, you see that one? You have not tried eggplant?
No, I don't really eat eggplant. It's okay.
I need to give you my fried eggplant recipe, or the fried eggplant recipe, or eggplant parmesan recipe, which is also really great. Because you could layer it like you do a lasagna, but instead of using the lasagna noodles, just use fried eggplant. Make sure you slice it thin. So,
maybe that's what it is. Because last time I had it, I felt like I was eating a piece of leather and a sponge from the kitchen at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I could do that. Yeah. Anyway. Moving ahead.
To hail.
This was the size of the hail was not one that would ruin a garden here, but this is what Don brought to my light when we were covering this thunderstorm. It was the amount of hail that came down that did cause some issues. A friend of ours, Ed, he shared some photos of his whole garden was just the flowers that he had up, and the shrubbery was just shredded down because of the amount of hail. I mean, that looks like it's snow.
Yeah, you have to shovel
from
that.
Joe's backyard in the Castleton area of Virginia Beach. That looks like snow came down. And part of the reason I think this felt like such a big hail event was because this occurred in Virginia Beach. Part of the population of the area. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the highest populated city in the state of Virginia.
Yes, it is.
So when you have a hail event like that, and we just go, hey, share your photos. I mean, we're getting a ton of these. This is a good a before and after. So this was during, marked from the Princess Anne Woods area. That's pea-size hail, maybe. maybe a little bigger.
Pretty small, maybe dime.
Maybe dime-sized hail.
And then we see these
but look
big
at the
things falling down,
quantity.
these pine cone-sized hailstones.
Yeah,
Well,
and it was the quantity of it that it was coming down that the aftermath seemed like it was like, there were some small twigs and small branches that came down from some trees, leaves that came down, all that kind of stuff. So I can't remember the last time we had a significant hail event like this, putting all the things together, the right timing of the thunderstorm, where it was across the area. Just fascinating. And hail, I think, is a very misunderstood form of precipitation. Here's the after.
Oh, this is the after one.
From the same, that's Mark, from the same Princess Anne Woods. So the quantity of the hail, and you could see, he had a tree branch down in the backyard. But look at the deck.
Branch,
look at the deck. Look at all the leaves that came down.
That's a mess.
It's a mess to clean up.
The hail that we get here isn't usually very large. It's very rare to get an event where we get $half size hail or a hail that's egg
quarter-size hail.
Yeah, quarter-size hail. You can get hail large enough if your roof is old enough where you can get a new roof out of insurance out of it.
Yeah.
That happened to me in my first house I bought. I had the house for 1 month. I made one payment on the house and then called the insurance company and said, hey, my roof is
damaged.
Gone.
Yeah.
My siding is shot from a storm that we had moved through. So I made, I don't know, a couple $100 for the payment for the insurance, and I got a whole new roof out of the deal.
Do you remember the size of hail or the impact
It was
of the
only
storm?
nickel in my neighborhood.
Wow.
It was only because I remember going out checking the hail size. It was only nickel size, and it did enough damage to it. Everyone got new roofs in the neighborhood.
Well, hey, there you go.
So
what
it
if
was
the wind
great.
was on it too?
Yeah.
Hail, I think it's a misunderstanding. Let me go back to undergraduate days.
Okay.
Walking around campus in the winter, and we had grapple falling from the sky. Grapple is, you and I describe it as Dippin' Dots. It's pretty much, it is the Dippin' Dot. If you remember that ice cream of the future, that's what you always say.
Yeah.
Falling down from the sky. Winter precipitation where a snowflake slightly melts as it falls down, and then that ice on the outside then refreezes. So it's kind of like an icy pellet in a way. That's the best way I could describe it.
Crush it with your fingers.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I remember walking around campus, and I was like, oh, grapple's coming down. And so many of my friends were bumping into him. Guys, did you see the hail outside?
Right.
Oh, my gosh, it's hailing. And all the meteorology students were like, God, it's not hail. Gosh, it's not hail. It's grapple. We're like going nuts. We're like, and a lot of people think that just ice pellets coming down from the sky are hail. But hail is specific to a thunderstorm. And a thunderstorm happens spring, summer, May, and fall. It is not a winter precipitation. Rarely do we get it out of a winter storm system.
It all depends on what's going on in the atmosphere for
Yeah.
hail development. Grapple development, too. We could do that maybe on another explainer, maybe in the fall once we get into that season when grapple is going to be more common. Hail is more common in those Midwest cities, those tornado alley locations, even down into Texas, too. They can get the big hail. Everything's bigger in Texas. Their hail can be huge, too.
Huge.
But for us on the other side of the Appalachians, I think that's a big reason that we don't get as much of the hail storms as we don't get that cold air aloft or in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. Did you want to go through this?
Yeah, and that's what we need to. So there are two things in a thunderstorm that there needs to be to produce a thunderstorm. You need air. You can leave it right on the slide. This is perfect.
Okay.
You need air moving up, and you need the air moving down, because what goes up in the atmosphere must come down. So the most important out of, I think, those two, air going up and air coming down, is the air going up in a thunderstorm. It forces the air to cool, condense, form the cloud. But the stronger the thunderstorm, the stronger that updraft is, the air moving up. So that is going to lift the air up, and it's going to grow the thunderstorm. Well, what's higher up in the atmosphere, it gets colder. It's why there's snow on top of mountains. It's why there's snow on top of the mountain in Hawaii, because you're higher up in the atmosphere.
The freezing level.
The freezing level. So if we have enough access to some cooler air, or sometimes in the atmosphere, cooler or colder air is lower because we have more access to it, thunderstorms can develop, and they could lift the air up above the freezing level. And if the thunderstorm is strong enough, that rising air prevents the rain from falling. It just picks up the raindrops, and the water moving around in the thunderstorm picks up those rain droplets, and then it brings them up above the freezing level. So when you put water in the freezer, freezes.
Yes.
Yeah. And that kind of goes through this cycle where the water droplets will go up, they'll freeze above the freezing level, they'll kind of filter back down because it's not perfectly floating up there. They'll come back down. They may melt a little bit below the freezing level before they get picked back up again. Then they freeze a bit more. And this process just repeats. And that little water droplet just starts to grow in size because every time it melts a little bit and then gets refrozen, it's just going to grow a bit in size.
And some may not know, why was the hail larger in this storm compared to the storm that we got 2 weeks ago? Let's say we get another hailstorm, and it's all the updraft strength.
Yeah, and the strength of the thunderstorm.
Yes.
So it's why a severe thunderstorm, the size of the hail is a criteria for a severity of a thunderstorm.
Yes.
The stronger the storm, the bigger the pieces of hail will be, and maybe more so unsymmetrical. They'll be weirdly shaped and larger and protruding because that looping process where they freeze and melt isn't a perfect loop. You know, it's kind of all over the place here. So once those hailstones grow large enough and start to outweigh the updraft, that's when they come down to the ground.
That's when they fall.
So it's kind of it's a product in itself, where the stronger the thunderstorm is, it's going to keep the hail droplets up there until they keep growing to outweigh the updraft. So stronger the thunderstorm, the bigger the hail. It's a super, super fun explainer. And it's great to kind of bust the mindset or the thought process that hail is in the winter. No, hail is a thunderstorm. Happens in spring, summer, warm, thunderstorms, stuff like that. So super, super fascinating. And also I like to think that they're not perfectly round too. And you're not going to get perfectly exact sizes of them coming down because it could be that updraft it's not perfectly vertical, it's moving a little bit.
I just had an epiphany. So let's say we got on a spacecraft, we went all the way to Titan.
Okay.
So we're on Titan, one of the moons of Jupiter, of Saturn, and it rains methane there. What if the freezing level for methane is somewhere in the cloud? Could it hail methane stones? I don't see why not.
If the rain process or what the precipitation process is the same on Titan, if the thunderstorm is the same,
right?
Wouldn't it act? Wouldn't it mirror? Wouldn't it be the same?
I don't
know.
Get
methane pellets coming down?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess
that smell, right?
Well, yeah, that'd be a pretty stinky place.
Yeah, pretty stinky place in general here. Or a best way to think of it too, I guess we'll go back to hail formation, is you remember I should have used this analogy, the indoor skydiving things.
The iFly?
Yeah, where you just like float.
Have you done that?
No, I've never done it.
It's fun.
You've done one?
Yeah, I've done it. It's fun.
It's not just like super loud in your face the whole time.
No earplugs. You wear earplugs,
of course.
And then you wear like a goggles too, so your eyes still work.
Here's my way to think about it. Do you get the butterfly effect when you're falling? No, because you're floating. Because you're instantly floating. They instantly balance you out when you're floating.
Yes, and there's someone I think running the controls based on the person that enters the tube.
Isn't that the thrill of skydiving? Is to get the falling effect, but then as soon as you reach your max acceleration, once you reach gravity's acceleration, then it's like, okay, then it just feels like you're floating.
It's a good way to ease into it. I've never skydived before, so I can't comment on what that feels like. Okay. But I would say it's a good way to ease into it for a lot of people because you don't have the fear of falling down towards the ground.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, the farthest you're going to fall is 6 feet.
Yes.
And then you're just going
to hit the bottom. And then you're good, and you hit the bottom.
And they have someone that helps you too. Like if you are more advanced,
or like you're bumping
you can do
into
your own
walls
thing
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that floating that you're doing in the iFly is pretty much what those hailstones are doing in the thunderstorm, and the ground is basically the freezing level, and the updraft of the thunderstorm is just keeping the hailstones or the raindrops up above the freezing level until they freeze and become ice, and then they start to weigh heavier than when they were liquid form, and then it's like, okay, now we're gonna make it down to the ground.
We should develop an experiment so we can partner with them
and then do it.
Have unlimited time in the tube. Someone think of that idea. And then we'll invite you along because you thought of the idea. So
let me bring back that question that you brought up too, because hail is bigger in those Midwest cities like you talked about, or out in the plains. Over here on the East Coast, is it something to do with our relationship to the water and how we're downwind of the mountains?
Could be.
Maybe it's just our latitude, because there's been some wacky hail events that I've experienced in Florida, but they weren't that common. And that's just because it was so warm down there. We wouldn't have the access to that colder air. They would happen in the spring or the fall season when it would be a little bit of a cooler.
When cold fronts showed up.
Okay.
But so you wouldn't get them in July.
Yeah.
Those pop-up
yes,
thunderstorms.
But I remember there was one hail event, And the current chief meteorologist now, Lou Turner's his name. He did this explainer about why the hail. It wasn't perfect. Like it was. They weren't even spherical. They were like weird, spiky. Like looked like something out of the planet.
Yeah.
And it just, his best way to explain it was a really good showing of the turbulence in a thunderstorm, especially a strong thunderstorm.
Interesting.
Those updrafts aren't perfect. So those hailstones, as they're melting and refreezing, they're not just perfectly looping. They're just like getting flown all over the place and they're thrown. And so like they're just all different really sizes
violent
and stuff.
Development. Because if you take a large hailstone, you can slice it in half and you can see the rings like a tree.
Yeah. And that's like we talked about, that's the
growth.
Yeah, the growth, but the freezing and then melting and then refreezing and then melting and refreezing. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Really, really neat. Have you ever eaten one? Hailstone?
Maybe small chunks,
Yeah, I've had a small chunk. It's good.
It's kind of fun, yeah.
Grapple tastes better, though.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
The white grapple, not the yellow stuff. So.
Not the yellow one.
All right. Are we doing good on time?
Yeah, we're good on time. We're good to close it out here.
Okay.
I think we're all right. Astrophotography, some insane stuff.
Yes.
And
hail development.
And hail development, also fun talker. Love talking about hail.
We have some fun topics coming up in the future weeks ahead. Next week, we're going to be talking to the Virginia Spaceport Authority, talking about their 30th anniversary is coming up and internship opportunities for there. And then D-Day, you're going to be discussing
in the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about the forecast that went into D-Day, the invasion, because we're coming up on the anniversary of that. And then I think in a couple of weeks, we're going to pair up and do some fun sports weather stuff with James Catato. So we got some cool stuff lined up here and Beyond the Forecast. Encourage y'all to keep watching and following along.
Yes, I do have a weather question from a viewer that we'll try and get to next week as well.
Perfect.
So we have a lot of things coming up on Beyond the Forecast. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day or night, whatever time it is for you.
Yeah, because this is running on Wavy Plus just all the time.
It's all the time.
The best part.
Non-stop. We're always there. All right. See you later.